But being lonely, sure, that can attract sympathy, you can be sympathetic towards somebody who feels lonely. But being alone is different. That shouldn't attract any sympathy or any pity at all. You can very much be alone and not be lonely, just as you can be in a crowd and still feel profoundly lonely. Hey you guys, so for today's video, I really want to talk to you all about spending time alone. I think this pandemic, among the many different challenges it has thrown at us, has thrown one that I think a lot of us either underestimated or didn't even consider. And that's really spending an extended period of time just by ourselves. So as of filming this video, we've spent about 7 months in quarantine in our homes by ourselves. Now, I'm not some kind of psychologist or a meditation expert or some kind of Zen guru even, but I have spoken to a lot of my friends about how this pandemic has really affected them. And I think in comparison to them, I have really had a pretty good time. I've actually been enjoying this extended period of time that I have on my own. And I hope that what I share with you will at least change the way you think about spending time by yourself. It'll make it at least tolerable, if not actually enjoyable. But before I get into that, there are 2 things I really want to say up front. Number 1 is, don't get me wrong, I really do miss deeply a lot of my pre-pandemic experiences and activities. I'm not some super introverted person who could just naturally flow into this whole vibe of an extended period of time alone. I really miss the club, the neighborhood bars, and the really big brunches. I've definitely had my fair share of ennui and my periods of inexplicable mood swings that could have easily been resolved by going on a nice brunch, by getting some drinks with my friends or the bartender at the neighborhood bar, by having a really cool night out with a group of friends at a nightclub, and then partying and dancing till 3 in the morning with some other cute strangers, and then stumbling back home and waking up the next morning with a sore throat because we just went too hard. All of that. I miss all of that. But again, even though I really do miss those moments and that time, I haven't just been surviving in this period of my life, in this period of our collective lives. It's definitely been more positive than just neutral, and I've definitely been doing more than just tolerating this for as long as it's going to last. Number 2, and this is something that has troubled me for a long time, not just because of this pandemic, but spending time alone has a really awful connotation to it for some reason, and it's really, really troubling to me. For some reason, whatever reason, maybe it's because our world is definitely biased towards extroversion and just always having people around us all the time, we really think that spending time alone is not something anybody would really choose to do out of their own volition. The immediate thought is that if you're spending time alone by yourself, you're probably deficient somewhere. You don't have any friends to hang out with, you're probably really shy, maybe you're just socially inept. Something is wrong about you. If you're traveling alone, it's probably because you don't have a partner or a friend group. That if you're eating by yourself, you have to be just visiting the city. Or maybe honestly, you were just stood up on a date. If you spent a weekend by yourself, there's no way you chose to do that. You just don't have any friends. Being alone is lazily and constantly equated to being lonely, which is a pitiable state. And I think maybe because of that reason, because we're so afraid of being perceived as being lonely, we never really spend any time alone, and we don't really know how to do that now that we're being forced to do it. But being lonely, sure, that can attract sympathy, you can be sympathetic towards somebody who feels lonely. But being alone is different. That shouldn't attract any sympathy or any pity at all. You can very much be alone and not be lonely, just as you can be in a crowd and still feel profoundly lonely. These are very different things. As somebody who has many deep and valuable friendships and relationships and still chooses to travel alone, to eat at restaurants alone, who loves a good day at the park just by themselves, listening to some good music on a playlist or just with a book, even just like sitting and like people watching and just sort of being in the moment for a bit. It's honestly a little sad or unfortunate that people keep thinking that being alone is something they would rather actively avoid. Alright, so with those comments out of the way, and I hope it wasn't too pedantic, but I did really feel like it was important to mention, let's get into it. What are the kinds of things I've really taken away that I think really allow this moment by myself being alone to actually be a pretty joyful experience, more than just surviving or tolerating it? Number 1 is have some kind of short, enjoyable ritual. Something that can kind of put you into a Zen state. I have found that having some kind of short ritual can really do a good job at like putting you into a completely different mindset, even just for a moment, and totally changes how you're feeling from how you were before you did that ritual. For me, that ritual really is brewing and drinking chai. There's something about adding all those different aromatics, cardamom, cinnamon, ginger, black tea, into bubbling water, then watching the milk sort of mix with the tea and smelling all those different fragrances come together, it just really gets me out of my head for a good 5 minutes. Afterwards, I just sit down with my cup of tea, a couple biscuits, and then I just enjoy it. I'm thinking about nothing else but the flavors, the experience, the fragrances, and that's it. I'm not reading the news, I'm not scrolling through social media, none of that. It's just me, my tea, and my biscuits. This Zen tea time, so everything from the making of the tea to then the drinking and the eating of biscuits with it, it just uplifts me ever so slightly but significantly. It puts me in a better state of mind than I was before. Now I know this makes me sound like an 80-year-old, but truly, this is so helpful. Now of course the ritual you find for yourself can be totally different. It should just be like super pleasurable and simple. So it could be brewing chai like I am, it could be making coffee, it could be sitting down with a blank piece of paper or a new document on Photoshop and just making something without judgment. It could be going for a brisk walk or a run, listening to a playlist that you love. It could just be a simple and calming skincare routine, any of that. Basically, a good, short, simple ritual can be very centering and calming and will definitely leave you in a more positive state of mind than you were before it. Number 2 is have a long-term skill that you want to build or a project that you want to do purely for yourself. Again, this is not for anyone or anything but yourself. It's not because it'll help you on your job, it's not because it'll help you climb some social ladder, it's not because it'll become a source of income in the future, it's not because somebody else does it, it's purely just for yourself because it sparks joy. Now for me lately, this has become my YouTube channel. So I love every aspect of it, from writing the videos, to filming, to editing. Okay, sometimes I hate editing and it's really frustrating, but I still generally like the whole process. And what I really love is coming out with a product at the end of it to be able to just kind of share that with the world, whether or not anybody watches it. It's just fun to like create something cool. A few other projects were cooking and baking. I've really been enjoying doing all of that. And I also just love reading nonfiction. I do a ton of that too because I just love spending my free time like thinking about society, how people work, how different people have different hypotheses for how people work. It's just fun stuff to think about and something I can keep building on as I read more and more. I find that whenever I kind of do this thing that truly just sparks joy, it's a skill, it's a project, whatever it is, I get into this state of deep work. And when I'm in this state of focus, every moment is pleasurable and I really just don't know where the time goes. I'll basically stop when I just naturally feel like it, or if I get hungry. One quick tip though, before you get into or embark on any kind of skill or project for the day, get done with all of your annoying errands and stuff before that, so that once you're out of your flow state, it's not 9 p.m. and you suddenly remember all those really annoying things you have to do. You're already kind of done with that earlier in the day. And number 3, and this is a tip I think that is probably more pandemic specific than not, but when you are talking to your friends and not having alone time, try to focus on things outside of the pandemic, other things you're generally excited about anyway, instead of just focusing and mulling over the pandemic itself. I actually want to quote something I recently read by this author, Jason Elliott, in his book, An Unexpected Light. So Jason is discussing this unexpected aspect of war. And he says, even a so-called war zone is not necessarily a dangerous place. Seldom is a war as all-encompassing as the majority of reports suggest. Countries and cultures do not simply draw to a halt in a period of conflict. There are the falls of shells, and there is the silence between them. Similarly, I think this pandemic exists, of course, and has put a lot of things on pause. But life and time are not on pause. They're consistently and constantly flowing, and you're still able to do things. When I talk to my friends, we still talk about things we're looking forward to, things we're excited to do, things we've learned recently, things we want to learn, all of that kind of stuff. Sure, we'll obviously vent about the problems and irritations and troubles that have come with this pandemic, but we'll also quickly course correct. Now, to be very clear, I'm definitely not advocating some kind of toxic positivity. I really want to stay far, far away from that nonsense. But what I am saying is that even if you are venting, make sure your venting is purpose-driven. That you truly are venting, which means like when you talk about your annoyances, your pains, and all of the troubles you're having, you really do end up feeling better afterwards. If at the end of this whole process of talking about those pains and troubles, you only end up feeling worse, then you weren't really venting. You were just mulling and being obsessed with the issue. It hasn't left you in a better place of mind. It wasn't really very purposeful. Now, some people may naively think and argue that not discussing your pains and problems in this pandemic is some kind of escapism. And to that, I would actually argue and say that honestly, stewing over something you can't change, just mulling over it, something you have no control over, something that just exists because it does, what's the point of that? That's escapism. You're escaping engaging with life and time that you have that's going and really slipping through your fingers by just being obsessed with the kind of problems you're having. And finally, and kind of related, but I think this actually applies at all moments, not just during the pandemic, but number 4 is be very selective about the media and stuff you're consuming. I think it's important now more than ever to check in with yourself and think about whether you're falling into some kind of rabbit hole of negative and sensationalist content. Did you read about the fires in California? Did you read about hunger, poverty, war, all of that's been going on? Awesome. It's important to be aware of what's happening in the world. But with every additional article you're reading afterwards, every additional picture, every additional detail, is it changing the way you're behaving? Is it really encouraging you to act any differently? Are you doing anything more? Is it changing any way you're being, other than being in a worse off mood than you were before after having read that additional piece of material? If the answer to that is no, then step out of it. Close that window, close that article, whatever it is, it's not helping you at all. Go do a ritual, go back to focusing on your long-term project or your goal, talk to a friend about something you're excited to do, whatever it is. Just sit down by yourself and think about how you want to use your time for the rest of the time that you have in the day. I can tell you that the day I removed my news notifications and my social media notifications, my mood and general sort of behavior has just been positive. I'm still very much aware about all of the big stuff. Maybe I learned a little bit later than everybody else that keeping up with the Kardashians has ended, but that's a sacrifice I'm very, very willing to make. Alright, so those are my thoughts and my tips around being alone, trying to make it something you can actually enjoy doing rather than just tolerating it and hoping it just passes over very quickly. I hope you found this video helpful. I hope there was something you could take away from it. And if you're someone who also enjoys spending time by yourself and being alone, I'm also curious what you really enjoy about it and also what kinds of things you do, perhaps things I haven't mentioned. I wonder if there are other things I can be doing with my time that I have by myself. Awesome, so if you watched this video so far, then thanks for watching. I hope you've been enjoying the kinds of content I've been putting out. If you like this video, watch the other videos I have as well. You can subscribe to this channel so you know when the next video is going to come out. Give this video a thumbs up because that's really encouraging to me and it's really nice to know that people are actually enjoying what I'm putting out. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So again, thanks for watching and I'll see you all next week.